Killing circumstances. So, 43 people were killed by the police in Louisiana while showing symptoms of mental illnesses. 37 showed unclear symptoms of mental illnesses, and 8 were on drugs or alcohol. So in this chart, we can see the victims' mental health at the time that they were killed. The pie chart illustrates the proportion of people killed in each mental health status group at the time they were killed between January 1st, 2013 and January 11th, 2024. You can hover over the chart to see the number of people killed within each category. And this data is coming from Mapping Police Violence. So for example, we can see that 148 people did not show symptoms of mental illnesses, 8 were on drugs or alcohol, 8 had unknown, 43 showed symptoms of mental illnesses, and 37 it was unclear, as we said above. You can also filter through any of these. So if you don't want to look at people who did not show symptoms of mental illnesses, you can click it and then just see for each of these categories how it populates. And we've included a case that the Justice Lab program at the ACLU of Louisiana has taken on surrounding one of these police killings. So I'm going to read it. The police found Mr. Stevenson in a parking lot following a call from his live-in girlfriend. At the time, he was experiencing a mental health crisis and had expressed suicidal intentions. After boxing Mr. Stevenson's car in, the first officer to the scene immediately began shouting at him and attempting to forcibly extract him from his vehicle. At which point, Mr. Stevenson began driving forwards and backwards towards an empty police unit in a straight line while yelling, "Kill me," repeatedly. Other officers arrived. Despite the absence of an immediate threat, the officers fired 21 shots into Mr. Stevenson's car, killing him. So this is just one of many of those cases where the police have killed someone who is suffering from a mental health crisis. More so, we can look at the proportion of people who have been killed while allegedly fleeing. Each bar represents the proportion of people killed while allegedly fleeing and not fleeing for each racial demographic between January 1st, 2015, when this data began being collected, and January 11th, 2024. We can hover over the bars to see the number of people killed per demographic. This data, again, is coming from Mapping Police Violence. And you can feel free to download any of it by selecting any of these download data buttons. So, for example, we can see that between January 2015 and January 2024, 29% of all of the time the police killed someone, they were reportedly fleeing. Of these people, 51% were black. So that's saying almost 30% of the time the police killed someone, they were fleeing from the officer. And specifically, we can look for different races. So we can see that 30 black people have been killed while fleeing, 19 white people, 7 people with unknown race, 2 Hispanic people, and 1 Asian person. And similarly to the above, we can remove either one of these categories by just simply selecting it, and then we can just see the number of people killed who are fleeing. So we can also look at the proportion of people killed who are allegedly armed. You can select each column, each column represents the number of killings grouped with the victim's alleged armed status. Select from the drop-down to compare data among racial categories and hover over each column to see the number of people killed. Note that an individual's armed status comes from police and media reports, as defined by Mapping Police Violence's methodology. What we can see, looking at all of this data, is that over 34% of the people killed by police in Louisiana were allegedly not armed, or not allegedly armed. And specifically, we can look for different demographic groups. So we can see that only 84 of the black people who were killed were allegedly armed. Only 46 of the white people who were killed were allegedly armed, and so on. Even in cases where an individual was purportedly armed, such circumstances should be noted to not constitute a justification for their death. Finally, we know that between January 1st, 2017, again when this data began being collected, through January 11th, 2024, only 24% of police killings resulted from a response to a violent crime. The other 76% were the result of a response to nonviolent offenses, holding a weapon, traffic stops, domestic disturbances, and mental health checks. Please note that's saying more than 3 out of 4 of the stops, more out of 3 out of 4 of the stops were for non-violent offenses, holding a weapon, traffic stops, and domestic disturbances and mental health checks.